Stop scrolling for a second, because what I am about to tell you is the single most significant shift inside the British monarchy since the abdication crisis of 1936. King Charles III just flew thousands of miles to the United States. He was within a short flight of his own son, and he did not go. He did not call. He did not send an envoy. According to diplomatic sources, he explicitly declined multiple requests from Prince Harry for a private audience. That is not a family missing a beat. That is a head of state drawing a constitutional red line in ink that does not wash off. Pause. Let that image settle. Charles was in America, Harry was in America, and the distance between them measured in miles was trivial. Measured in politics, it was the width of the Atlantic Ocean. And by the time the king's plane lifted off the tarmac without a Montecito stop on the itinerary, every serious observer on both sides of the Atlantic understood the message. Harry is no longer a representative of the British state. He is a private citizen whose presence is no longer a priority for the crown. Full stop. Picture the scene inside the Sussex household when that itinerary became public. Picture the phone calls, the quick, frantic consultations with advisors. The moment Harry's team realized that his father, a man battling serious health issues, had made the deliberate decision to use his limited energy on state business rather than on his own son. That is not a scheduling conflict. That is a priority. And the priority, once revealed, cannot be unseen. Charles did not have time for Harry. Not because he did not have hours, because he no longer had the political or personal will to spend them, and every private secretary, every palace advisor, every senior royal aide on both sides of the Atlantic understood in the moment what that meant. Here's the question I want you to hold in your mind all the way through this video. If the king will not meet with his own son, who is about to fill the space the son left behind, because a monarchy, by its nature, abhors a vacuum, and the man who walks through that empty doorway is going to define the next 50 years of the House of Windsor. I am going to tell you his name. I am going to tell you how he was chosen. And I am going to show you why the Sussex camp, watching him rise from their enclave in California, is reportedly in a state of quiet panic that no amount of Netflix spin can fix. Stay with me, because by the end, you are going to understand something the palace press office will never say out loud. The era of correction is not a temporary strategy. It is a permanent restructuring. And it is already finished. Let me set the stage. His name is James Alexander, Earl of Wessex, 18 years old, the son of Prince Edward and Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. Until very recently, he was a background figure. A polite young man in a suit, a name you might have heard at a christening, a face you might have glimpsed in a family photograph on a state occasion. And then, between the final months of 2025 and the first weeks of 2026, something changed. James Alexander stopped being a background figure. The palace elevated him quietly, strategically, surgically to the front line of the working monarchy. And the British public, watching this unfold in real time, responded in a way that should make the Sussex team in Montecito break into a cold sweat. They embraced him immediately, without reservation. Without controversy, without the exhausting 5-year emotional whiplash that has defined every interaction with Harry and Meghan. Let me describe what that public embrace actually looked like, because the data tells a story. Polling in the first quarter of 2026 showed James's favorability rating climbing week over week. Not in dramatic viral spikes, in steady, consistent, almost boring progression. The kind of progression that palace strategists love, because it is the pattern of durable popularity, not flash-in-the-pan enthusiasm. The British press, normally restless for conflict, has been notably gentle with him. No tabloid has tried to construct a scandal. No television panel has debated his suitability. He has, in the opening months of his elevation, been allowed to simply exist, to do his duties, and to be received by the public on his own terms. That treatment in modern royal coverage is almost unheard of. And it tells you everything about what the press, the palace, and the public have collectively decided they want. Here is the part that is going to genuinely shock you. James Alexander has been described internally by palace advisors as the spare that was promised. Read that phrase again. The spare that was promised. It is the most surgical rejection of Harry's narrative of personal exile ever constructed. It implies, without ever saying so explicitly, that Harry was never the indispensable figure he claimed to be. That the slot he vacated was not a hole in the institution. It was a position that could be filled by someone more suited to it. And it has been. At 18, James is being compared inside palace walls to the late Prince Philip. Not because of any particular military accomplishment, not because of any grand public gesture, but because of something much quieter, and in the palace's calculation, far more valuable. Poise, discretion, a profound respect for the performance of duty, consistency, the willingness to stand behind the king, hold the ceremonial line, and not demand that the entire institution reorient itself around his personal feelings. And here is the brutal comparison that the Sussex camp cannot unhear. While Harry and Meghan have spent the early months of 2026 explaining their professional collapse through a series of royal standard excuses, James has been fulfilling his duties with a quiet dignity that has captivated the British public. That contrast is not accidental, it is editorial. It is the palace, slowly and deliberately, rewriting the narrative of what the younger royal is supposed to look like. And the Sussex version, by the new standard, looks like a cautionary tale. But that is nothing compared to what comes next. Because the event that truly triggered this institutional shift happened in November of 2025. And it is the single piece of behavior, more than any other, that made the palace decide the era of tolerance was finished. I want you to really hear what happened, because it is the kind of thing you do not come back from. While the rest of the United Kingdom was observing Remembrance Sunday, the single most sacred day in the British calendar for honoring the fallen, Harry and Meghan were at Kris Jenner's 70th birthday party in Calabasas, a lavish, glittering celebrity event. Kim Kardashian was there. Every major face in American reality television was there. The Sussexes reportedly were there too, and they were photographed, and those photographs, through the mysterious alchemy of social media, began to circulate. While back in London, the King and the Prince of Wales were laying wreaths at the Cenotaph, while veterans bowed their heads, while the nation observed 2 minutes of silence for the men and women who died in service to the crown, the Sussexes were, according to multiple reports, at the party. Let me paint both pictures side by side, because the contrast is almost too sharp to believe. In London, a gray November sky, the heavy coats of mourning, the solemn march down Whitehall. Military bands playing Nimrod, poppies pinned to every lapel, bells tolling across the city. The king, a man privately battling cancer, standing stiff, backed in the cold, to lay a wreath on behalf of his entire nation. The crowd lining the streets, many of them relatives of the fallen, heads bowed, tears visible on the faces of older men who still remembered the conflicts those wreaths were meant to honor. That is the scene in London. And in Calabasas, California, thousands of miles away, a tent had been set up for a birthday. Music, cocktails, designer dresses, camera flashes. The air-conditioned glitter of an American celebrity party. Kim Kardashian working the room, a 70-year-old birthday celebrant beaming in front of a multi-tier cake. And somewhere in that crowd, reportedly, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, a prince of the United Kingdom, a man who had served in combat. A man who had, in previous years, always made a point of observing Remembrance Sunday wherever in the world he happened to be. Those two pictures, set side by side, are why the British establishment lost whatever residual patience it had been holding on to. Now, here is the part where it gets absolutely insane. When the contradiction became apparent and the press began to notice, the Sussex public relations machine initiated an immediate damage control operation. Harry and Meghan reportedly asked Kim Kardashian and Kris Jenner to scrub images of them from social media. Their justification, whispered to friendly outlets, was that they wished to show solemn respect for the king and the fallen soldiers by not appearing in celebratory contexts during a period of mourning. Read that sentence again, slowly, because the logic collapses the moment you apply even a little pressure. If you truly respected the solemnity of Remembrance Sunday, you would not have attended a celebrity birthday party that weekend in the first place. You would have declined the invitation, you would have stayed home, you would have observed the 2 minutes of silence in your own living room. The act of attending the party was the disrespect. The scrubbing of the images was not repentance, it was public relations. And the distinction between the two, to a British audience that takes Remembrance Sunday with deep and inherited seriousness, is enormous. The reaction inside Buckingham Palace, according to sources who have maintained disciplined silence for years, was one of quiet, incandescent fury. The palace communications department saw the move as the height of performative piety. A couple who had spent years systematically attacking the monarchy through documentaries and memoirs, now attempting to hide behind the institution's most sacred traditions to avoid a public relations nightmare. The hypocrisy was staggering, and it was, according to one source, the final proof the palace needed that the Sussexes would use the crown's sanctity as a get-out-of-jail-free card whenever their own professional missteps required cover. Veteran royal commentators like Paula Froelich and Dan Wootton dismantled the royal shield publicly. They pointed out, in plain language, what the palace was too dignified to say aloud. This was not respect. This was a brand protecting itself with a borrowed flag. And the British public, normally slow to abandon a royal figure, saw it too. The needle on public sentiment did not just move. It moved with such force that internal polling in December of 2025 reportedly showed Harry's favorability rating inside the United Kingdom at its lowest point since his wedding day. That was the moment the era of correction began, not with a press release, not with a public statement, but with a quiet internal decision made somewhere between Buckingham Palace and Clarence House that the Sussexes were no longer estranged relatives. They were tactical liabilities. And tactical liabilities, in the language of institutional strategy, require containment. But stay with me, because while the palace was containing, Hollywood was doing something even more devastating. They were withdrawing. Here's the part most people get completely wrong. They think the Sussex crisis is a royal family story. It is not. It is a Hollywood story. And the most dangerous thing that happened to Harry and Meghan in the last 12 months did not happen in London. It happened in Los Angeles, specifically in the offices of William Morris Endeavor, where a man named Ari Emanuel, one of the most powerful agents in the entertainment industry, made a phone call that ended his professional relationship with Meghan Markle. Let me walk you through the most cinematic detail of this entire collapse, because it reads like a scene from a movie. The breaking point reportedly came during the Thanksgiving holiday of 2025. Meghan, according to sources inside the agency, became incensed when William Morris Endeavor staff were unavailable to provide round-the-clock crisis management during the American holiday. This was, in the words of one source, the diva behavior the couple had spent years denying during their time in London, manifesting with such intensity that Emanuel concluded the Sussex brand was no longer worth the internal friction. Think about what that means. Ari Emanuel is a man whose entire professional life is built on managing impossible personalities. He represents movie stars with egos large enough to blot out the sun. He handles athletes, political figures, billionaires, provocateurs. He does not walk away from difficult clients. He walks toward them. He monetizes them. He is the closer of closers. The final boss of the Hollywood ecosystem. When Ari Emanuel decides the relationship is not worth the friction, you have done something fundamentally, structurally wrong with your brand. And Meghan reportedly did it on Thanksgiving. I want you to understand how a decision like that actually gets made inside a major agency, because this is not a soap opera. It is a cold calculation run through a spreadsheet. Agents like Emanuel are constantly evaluating their client roster against a simple internal metric: return on attention. How much time does this client demand relative to the revenue they generate? When the attention costs exceed the revenue, even for a celebrity with a famous last name, the agency starts quietly reducing its investment. Fewer calls returned, smaller pitches received. Deals that might have moved in a week stretched out over months. The client notices eventually, but by then the slope is already steep. And in the end, the agency does not have to fire the client. The client, frustrated by the decline, fires the agency, which is, according to multiple accounts, exactly the dynamic that played out during the Thanksgiving break of 2025. The friction was the symptom, the calculation was the cause. The professional divorce from William Morris Endeavor stripped the Sussexes of the single most important layer of protection they had in Hollywood. A major agency is not just a booking service, it is a political shield. It is a negotiation force. It is the mechanism by which talent gets paid, gets protected, gets leveraged across deals. Without that agency, you are exposed. You are one scandal from cancellation. You are one bad headline from irrelevance. And the Sussexes in the spring of 2026 are exactly that. The silence from Oprah Winfrey is, if anything, even more devastating than the Emanuel split, because Oprah was the one who gave them their stage in the first place. The 2021 sit-down interview was the platform from which the Sussex narrative launched globally. It was the event, the televised declaration, the document that defined the couple's public identity for the next 5 years. And now, according to multiple media insiders in Los Angeles, Oprah has moved to protect her personal legacy by maintaining an absolute, unyielding distance from the couple. Why? Because several of the central claims made in that interview have, over the years, been quietly but definitively dismantled. The claim of a secret marriage 3 days before the royal wedding was publicly contradicted by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Other details, once presented as revelation, have eroded under scrutiny. For a media figure whose entire brand is built on the pursuit of the truth, being the vehicle for narratives that have since been challenged is not a neutral outcome. It is a stain. And Oprah, a woman who has spent 50 years building the most durable personal brand in American television, is not about to let that stain migrate onto her own legacy. She has relegated the Sussexes to what insiders describe as the do not mention list. And that silence from a woman whose voice has defined cultural legitimacy for a generation resonates more loudly in the halls of power than any tabloid headline ever could. Think about the weight of that do not mention list. Oprah does not block people casually. She does not need to. Her approval is a rare, precious commodity that has made and unmade careers for decades. Writers, authors, activists, presidents all have had their trajectories shaped by a single word from her. When she chooses to stop speaking about a public figure, that silence operates in her ecosystem the way a delisting operates in a stock market. The asset is no longer in play. The asset has no price. The asset is, for practical purposes, invisible. And invisibility, when the previous visibility was global, is a form of soft death. Not dramatic, not cruel, just simply the end of the conversation. Let me be direct about what is happening here. The two most important Hollywood patrons the Sussexes had, the ones who translated their royal exit into American commercial viability, are both quietly and definitively done. Oprah will not endorse them. Ari Emanuel will not represent them, and in a town that runs on relationships and whispered endorsements, those two withdrawals are the sound of a door closing that does not reopen. Which brings us to the streaming deals, the big ones. The $100 million Netflix arrangement, the $25 million Spotify deal, the foundations of the Sussex financial empire. As of April 2026, those high-budget deals have entered a state of terminal stagnation. Projects that were once heralded as revolutionary have been quietly shelved or stalled in what industry insiders call development hell. Industry analysts point to a credibility gap where exorbitant expectations were met with lackluster creative output. And here is where the Sussex public relations machine made, in my view, its most fatal strategic error. Rather than acknowledge that the creative work was not landing with audiences, they pivoted to a new narrative. Meghan began telling friendly outlets that her projects were stalled because she was laboriously self-editing to ensure she did not offend the king. A woman who spent years attacking the institution on global television was now claiming she was too respectful to release a cooking show. The logical contradiction is breathtaking. Veteran royal commentators dismantled the claim within hours. And here is the devastating part. The palace did not even need to respond. The contradiction spoke for itself. You cannot spend 5 years on stages and in documentaries disclosing intimate family details and then claim, when your ratings drop, that you are now silenced by the very royal standards you previously ignored. The market, having watched the whole journey, is not buying it. The American audience, initially captivated by the drama of the royal exit, has grown discerning. They see the contradiction. And the term that has attached itself to the Sussex brand in the American press, the term that has stuck since the Spotify collapse, is grifters. Once that word attaches itself to a public figure, the commercial consequences are severe. Heritage brands, the Dior's and Gucci's and Balenciaga's of the world, prioritize stability and timelessness, qualities that are fundamentally at odds with the volatile and historically inconsistent nature of the Sussex narrative. Reports indicate these houses have issued firm but polite rejections to any major partnership. Charity galas that once competed for the Sussex presence are now quietly withdrawing invitations. Proximity to the Sussex scandal is now viewed, in elite circles, as a career-ending risk. But hold on, because the financial pressure created by all of these withdrawals has now pushed the Sussexes into a territory that is, in my personal view, the most uncomfortable chapter of this entire story. And I want to warn you in advance, what comes next is the part that has even their most sympathetic observers expressing genuine concern. For years, Prince Harry campaigned publicly against the paparazzi culture that he blamed for his mother's death. He filed lawsuits, he gave speeches, he aligned himself with tech censorship groups to argue that the public posting of children's images was a fundamental violation of human rights. It was, by any honest reading, one of the defining principles of his post-royal identity. The protection of children, the sanctity of private family life, the refusal to allow his own children to become content the way he felt he had. By the spring of 2026, those principles, according to multiple observers, have been quietly sacrificed on the altar of financial survival. The mansion costs $14 million to maintain. The security bill runs into the millions. King Charles has definitively refused to subsidize either one. And with the commercial contracts collapsing, the Sussexes, according to critics, have been forced into the mommy blogger and influencer economy, an economy that runs on one currency above all others: images of children. The recent release of the Easter video, the skiing clips, the carefully staged family moments, the back to basics, aggressively relatable family content, all of it, according to digital forensics experts, shows glaring inconsistencies. Moments where Lilibet's hair color and length appear to change abruptly between frames. Moments where the relative sizes of the two children appear physically impossible within the supposed time frame of a single holiday. Moments where the overall aesthetic of the footage suggests, to multiple analysts, a quilted together montage rather than a continuous recording. That suggestion, that the footage may be stitched together from multiple moments to project an illusion of current family life. That is the detail that has widened the credibility gap into a canyon. Because the man who once claimed to hate the media's intrusion into his childhood is now, according to these analysts, presiding over what amounts to the digital commodification of his own heirs. The irony is devastating, and it is the kind of irony that does not escape the British public, which has a deep, inherited suspicion of performative parenting. The palace's inner circle, including Princess Anne and the Duchess of Edinburgh, reportedly view this pivot with a mixture of sadness and cold vindication. Cold vindication, because they warned for years that the Sussex commercial model would eventually consume the very privacy the couple claimed to be protecting. Sadness, because the children themselves are innocent. They did not choose this. They were born into it, and the comparison, painful as it is, writes itself. While James Alexander is seen performing his duties with a genuine, unforced dignity that requires no camera filters, the Sussex children appear, in critics' words, as solitary shadows in a vast cold estate. A palatial prison, as one commentator put it. The contrast is politically and socially devastating. I want to pause on the ethical weight of this moment because I think it is the part we do not talk about enough. A parent's job is to protect a child from the consequences of the parent's own choices. That is the deal. When you take on the role of a parent, you accept that your needs, your ambitions, your public identity, your commercial interests, all of those things become secondary to one single priority: the well-being of the person you brought into the world. And whatever you think of the Sussex adults, whatever your politics on the royal family, whatever your feelings about Netflix deals or mansion financing, I think most fair-minded viewers will agree on one point. The children did not ask to be content. They did not sign up to be a revenue stream. And if the footage of them is being stitched together, curated, staged, released on a timetable that serves a brand rather than a family, then something has gone fundamentally wrong with the order of priorities inside that home. The palace sees it, the British public sees it, and increasingly even the American outlets that were once the Sussexes' most reliable defenders are beginning to see it too. Let me bring you back to Harry specifically, because the professional collapse has hit him, personally, in a way that the tabloids are only beginning to register. Once rumored to command six-figure fees for a single appearance on the speaking circuit, Harry has recently been reduced to acting as a celebrity pinch hitter for corporate events. During a recent symposium in Australia, his fee reportedly dropped to a mere $50,000. To most people, $50,000 is an enormous sum. To a man whose lifestyle requires a burn rate in the millions per year, it is a rounding error, a line item that cannot sustain a security detail, let alone a mansion. And here is the psychological knife. Royal watchers have begun using a phrase to describe Harry's new position within his own family unit. They are calling him Meghan's commercial spare. The man who spent decades being William's spare has, in the calculation of analysts, simply transferred his subordinate position from one household to another. He is no longer supporting the crown. He is supporting the brand, and the brand, as you now know, is cratering. Which brings us back to James Alexander. Stay with me, because this is where the full picture becomes unmistakable. By April 2026, James has been strategically elevated from a background member of the working corps to the primary embodiment of the monarchy's future stability. The palace's strategy, often referred to by insiders as the doctrine of continuity, focuses on presenting James as the antithesis of the Sussex brand. Where Harry and Meghan's presence was defined by calculated reveals and high-retention drama, James represents a return to the stoic, service-oriented model of the late Prince Philip. His poise during the 2026 state opening of Parliament drew quiet admiration from palace advisors and parliamentarians alike. His growing role within the Duchy of Cornwall signals that his future is being planned in detail, not left to chance. The political implications of this elevation are profound. For years, the Sussexes operated under the assumption that the crown would eventually be forced to negotiate with them due to a perceived lack of popular younger royals to fill the ranks. That assumption was the entire leverage of their position. By fast-tracking James into high-profile duties, the King and Prince William have destroyed that leverage completely. The narrative in the United Kingdom has shifted decisively. The British public is no longer asking when Harry will return. They are instead focused on the rise of James. That shift in the currency of monarchy is everything. The Earl of Wessex brings a sense of fresh, untainted loyalty that highlights, without ever directly naming, the volatile and historically inconsistent nature of the Sussex behaviors. He does not need to attack his cousin. He simply shows up. He does the work. He smiles politely. He stands where he is asked to stand. He says what he is asked to say. He does not complain. He does not leak. He does not give interviews. He does not launch a jam brand. He does not threaten to pull out of state occasions. He does the quiet, disciplined work of being royal. And the British public, starved of that simple consistency for half a decade, has responded with a collective sigh of relief. The reaction inside the Sussex camp to James's rise has reportedly been one of quiet desperation, manifested through the royal standard defensive pivot. As James earns accolades for his quiet dedication, Meghan has attempted to frame her own professional silence as a similar act of noble restraint. But the palace's indifference to those claims serves as the ultimate correction. By simply not engaging with the Sussex pious excuses, the Crown has allowed the contrast between James's active service and the Sussex commercial atrophy to speak for itself. The inner circle of Anne, Edward, and Sophie has formed a unified front, ensuring that the transition of the spare role from Harry to James is viewed not as a family rift, but as an institutional upgrade. An institutional upgrade. Read that phrase and feel its weight, because that is the language of a corporation, not a family. And it reveals something very important about how the palace now views the Sussex situation. This is no longer a wound that needs healing. This is a vacancy that has been filled. And once a vacancy is filled, the institution moves on. Whether or not the former occupant is ready, by late spring of 2026, the era of correction has reached its clinical conclusion. The British monarchy has not only survived the Sussex insurgency, it has emerged with a structural clarity that few predicted during the turbulent years of 2020 and 2021. The final phase is defined by what insiders are calling a loud silence. A strategic refusal by Buckingham Palace to grant Harry and Meghan even a tangential link to the institution's future. During the 100th anniversary commemorations of Queen Elizabeth II's birth, the absence of the Sussexes was not a scandal, it was a footnote. Almost nobody commented, almost nobody missed them. The king was busy showcasing the working core. The presence of James Alexander at the side of the Prince and Princess of Wales provided a visual narrative of a trimmed-down monarchy that is focused on duty, not grievance. James has effectively inherited the spare mantle, and his popularity with the British public, which prizes his drama-free loyalty, has rendered Harry's potential return not just impossible, but structurally unnecessary. That is the word that should echo. Unnecessary, not forbidden, not rejected. Simply unnecessary. Because someone else has walked through the door, picked up the ceremonial sash, and done the work without making a fuss. And that, I suspect, is what the Sussex camp finds the hardest to absorb. Behind the scenes, the palace's response to the Sussex claims of royal restraint has been one of surgical indifference. Sources within the palace communications team reportedly view the pious rebranding as a transparent attempt to use the crown to explain away a lack of creative bankability. The inconsistencies that have plagued the Sussex narrative, from the 2021 Oprah interview to the Kardashian birthday debacle, have destroyed what observers call the authenticity index. The palace understands that the public can now see through the tactic. The couple cares about royal standards only when their commercial contracts are being canceled and their reputation is at zero. The bank of the monarchy, both financial and reputational, is closed to the Sussexes. That is the real message of the king's American visit. That is the real message of Harry not being on his father's itinerary. That is the real message of James Alexander's carefully choreographed elevation. And that is the real message of the palace's absolute, unwavering silence in response to every Sussex provocation. The era of correction has demonstrated something important, and I want you to hear this because it is the lesson buried under all the tabloid noise. A sense of birthright is no match for the reality of duty. Blood gets you in the room, but only work keeps you there. Harry was born into the family. James is being trusted with the family. And the difference between those two positions, which seemed invisible in the years of plenty, is everything in the years of reckoning. The final edit of the 2026 crisis is being written in the halls of Parliament and the quiet corridors of Sandringham. Harry and Meghan are left in a no-man's land. Too controversial for Hollywood's heritage brands, too alienated for the royal fold, their calculated vanity has led to a total systemic failure. Meanwhile, the bells of the monarchy ring for a new era, one where the performance of duty is the only gateway to the throne. The exile of the Sussexes is no longer a temporary rift. It is a permanent state of being. The book on Harry and Meghan has been closed, and the radiant monarchy moves forward, leaving the shadows of Montecito behind. Now let me bring you back to the question I asked at the very beginning. If the king will not meet with his own son, who is going to fill the space the son left behind? You now have the answer. A quiet, polite, polished young man from a side of the family almost nobody outside the United Kingdom had been paying attention to. James Alexander, Earl of Wessex, the spare that was promised. He did not have to be charming. He did not have to be brilliant. He did not have to deliver a viral speech or a memoir or a Netflix documentary. He simply had to be reliable, to show up, to do the work, to honor the discipline. And while Harry and Meghan were learning the hard way that fame is not the same thing as value, James was learning the opposite lesson. That value, quietly accumulated over years of unglamorous service, eventually outperforms fame every single time. That is the final story of the era of correction. And it is a story with a lesson for all of us, not just for the people inside the palace walls. Your loudest moment is rarely your most valuable one. Your quiet consistency, accumulated over years, is what the world eventually learns to trust. Harry had the louder moment, James had the quieter decade, and the decade, in the end, won. There is one more thing I want you to take away from this, because it is bigger than this specific family, bigger than this specific country, bigger than this specific year. The pattern you just witnessed, loud declaration, commercial exploitation, institutional correction, is a pattern that repeats itself in industries and institutions all over the world. Every business, every corporation, every political party, every religion, every family. When a member of the inner circle decides that the institution exists primarily as a stage on which to perform their personal brand, the institution eventually, inevitably, corrects. Sometimes loudly. Sometimes, as in this case, with a quiet indifference that is even more brutal than a loud rejection. The monarchy is not a unique target for this dynamic. It is just a particularly visible example of it. And what you are watching in the Sussex collapse is not a royal story. It is a human story about the difference between being part of something and using something. And about what happens when an institution, however old and however patient, finally decides that it knows the difference. So now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Is the era of correction fair, or has the palace gone too far? Does Harry have a path back, or is the door permanently closed? And what do you make of James Alexander? Is he the future the monarchy needed, or is this all just a convenient narrative designed to paper over a much deeper institutional problem? I read every single comment, and I want to know where you stand. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, do me two quick favors. Hit that like button, because it is the single most powerful signal you can send to the algorithm to push this kind of analysis to more viewers. And hit subscribe, because the next chapter of this story, the one about James Alexander's official investiture and the hidden clauses inside his newly drafted royal duty charter, is already being prepared. Then click the next video on your screen. Because after everything you just heard, I promise you, what comes next is going to change the way you see this entire family. Stay with me. The era of correction is not over. The era of rebuilding has only just begun.